Hello, fellow metaphorists. Let's talk about metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. I'm just kidding. We're talking about RE fantasy. I've been debating what to do in terms of how to talk about this. I made videos about the game when all we had was a bunch of dev blog content and a bunch of cryptic trailers slash teasers. Initially, I was going to revisit everything, but this video is me rushing. I'm rushing because something was found in the trailer and it's insane and no one's talking about it. So let's talk about it. First, I'm going to look at this trailer thoroughly and describe everything that I see. If you don't want to see this, then just skip ahead. I'm going to put chapters, I think, in this video. Basically, the trailer opens with a fantasy world and our world, and also some live footage of Tokyo. I say it's Tokyo because you can see Tokyo Skytree, Shibuya Crossing also, and what I think is Chiyoda. The transition includes a very quick snippet of a book that seems to have someone maybe speaking to a crowd with what looks like a kid, an adult, and an old man, all on what looks like a scale. The next page has someone pointing at a page that features what looks like someone playing with a doll, someone messing with the back of a girl in a dress, and some other stuff. The final page has some figures all pointing out or doing a gesture reminiscent of that first image with a box in the middle. I kind of superimposed them because it looked like they went together, and I think they kind of do. Then a page of something is tearing after being asked, what if the world we live in today was their utopia? In the Japanese version, it says, what if this present is the utopia they envisioned? The book imagery is very present in the trailer. We see some generic characters in the background, but it's clear that they're fantasy characters in a semi-advanced fantasy setting, not too advanced though. And we also see silhouettes of what look like 5 men. Then we see an old guy who seems to probably be the middle guy from that silhouette. He's got pointed ears and he's got some kind of markings on his face and his forehead glows with the same way the protagonist does. Then we see a man whose arms are outstretched and his forehead is glowing too. But the arrow that marks his eye-shaped glowy thing is pointing a different direction than the other one. I don't know if it's flipped for the trailer or if these eyes are symbolic of something. The guy with his arms outstretched also has dragon horns. Then we see the protagonist without the glow, but now he has a hillbilly-looking pixie, and we get more people with that glowy eye thing. Not everyone, though. And then we get a Majora's Mask type moon thing looking down, and in my opinion, it looks like the center is like a nose bridge, but where one eye should be, there's like multiple faces, and then the other eye socket is just like an eye. There's light going from the land towards the sky, and I think that's people being teleported, probably. And then we see the Majora's Mask moon thing, and it looks like the faces are more developed, so possibly the moon thing was absorbing the people, or I don't know. There's a small one that looks the same, and then there's a biggish one that looks like an old man, but not super old, but he's got like a mustache or something. And there's like a middle one with horns. It kind of reminds me of that booklet page, but I don't know. We then see a guy who is cursed laying on a slab with the protagonist mascot character and a man sitting on a square platform with circles. It's a really interesting platform thing, and I couldn't figure out why it looks so familiar to me, so if you know what it looks like, then let me know. Above the cursed guy is a short sword and a staff and a crown in the middle. My guess is that he's the leader or next in line. I mean, we get dialogue that explains that he's literally a prince who's been in a coma for like 10 years because of a curse, so. Then we find out we're in the capital. It's called Grand Trad. The scene changes to see Protag surfing on his sword, and we see a carriage full of humanoids. They are all kind of gray for some reason, which is weird because the background characters are in color. The carriage NPCs are all humanoid, looking like cat humans or rabbit humans, etc., etc. The carriage itself reminds me of the early art from the game. This is where I'd like to point out the mission thing on the right, which makes me think that there's a set date for whatever is supposed to happen, some sort of calamity. We then see the protag powering up his demi-fiend tattoos, and then breathing hard in what looks like a temple or a castle. Then him, Fairy, Dragon Man, and Elf Girl all seemingly acknowledging someone else or a crowd from outside of a temple or castle. Then we see a map. You can see a cave, a fire, some like cracked eggs or something, and a starting castle area. There's a text near the yellowish flower field that says the region of Marigold. I'll tell you how I know that later on. Possibly that mechanical looking thing we saw in the sky in some scenes before might be a ship that you can fly, or it might be a different thing that Nurse also controls. Lo and behold, we see the protagonist on a bow of a ship, or the stern, I don't know which one's the front. On closer look, it's got legs, and Nereus is indeed driving it, and we know it's called the Gauntlet Runner. But the date has moved up to 717. We also see the name of the new location, Port Browhaven. We also see there's some commands opening up on the bottom from left to right. It's followers, save, calendar, requests, traveler's voice, menu, map, and royal virtues. Then we get a good look at the menu. The menu has skill, item, equipment, awakened steel, party, follower, quest, calendar, journal, system. I'm assuming the awakened steel might be a reference to the sword. It seems like a magical special sword. Those seem more or less to align with some of the stuff that you can quick access that we just listed like literally a second ago. But now we know a follower is not the same as a party member. We don't know what the awakened steel is, but like I said, my guess is the sword you can ride on. And we don't know what the royal virtues are or traveler's voice, which my guess is for the latter, that it is the journal. The money is called money in this game. And notice there's mag, short for magnetite. It reoccurs in Mega 10, but it's also a real thing that exists outside of Mega 10. This is usually used for summoning demons or various other demon-related functions in SMT. It makes me think that followers are the demon equivalent in this game, or perhaps the archetypes might be the thing that require mag. The equipment page shows us that there seems to be classes that rank and level independently from the character level, which to me implies you can change or evolve them. We also get character names: Traveling Boy, Stroll is the Dragon Man, Hulkenberg is the elf, Jaime is the mascot, and Gallica is the weird pixie. Some name deep diving: Stroll is a European surname. I couldn't really find any info on it. Supposedly it's South German in origin, and is a diminutive of Stroh, which is a nickname for a farmer with little and bad hay, according to the Dictionary of American Family Names, which I'm sure is a trustworthy source. Hulkenberg is also a German name. Hulken, meaning Hulken, I don't know, and Berg, meaning mountain, so I guess large mountain? Jaime is weird because I couldn't find anything German necessarily, but when I looked at the Japanese version, I realized that his name is spelled Haizame, which could be a reference to sand sharks, but that's a very specific name for sand sharks that's in the Sado region of Japan. I wouldn't exactly agree with that. Also, I think that it's pronounced Jaime, not Haizme, though it could be Haizme because of Haizame being the Japanese. Gallica is a European rose, Rosa gallica, that's red or pink, and it's used in perfumery. This breed of rose is also known for its healing properties and benefits, so it's kind of fitting for a pixie name. We then see the face of the protag when he's demi-fiending, and the headband looking thing that looks a lot like Aegis's thing. And we get to see the battle menu, archetype, call power, which, based on inference, seems to be which of those personas you can summon, but we call them archetypes here, I think. I say this because, well, if you look at the bottom right, you'll notice that it says also the fantasy classes: Thief, Fighter, Knight, and Seeker. If you have a keen eye, you'll notice that Stroll's archetype is different. It says Fighter instead of what it said previously, which is Warrior. HP and MP are lower on this screen, which suggests to me that Warrior is the evolution on Fighter, but his archetype power is still the same in that image. The mobs in the image are a flower with legs, a moth, and a gay tooth. Get it? Because it's Homo Tenta. The rest of the battle menu is boring. Weapon for standard attack, guard for defense, pass for passing, items for items. And the interesting one is synthesis, which I thought was going to be the menu thing for team-up attacks, but it's actually a skill menu, which calls into question the archetype thing and what it's for, unless you're changing your archetypes mid-battle, like you can change persona mid-battle. The list of skills we see are new skills that haven't been in Mega 10, like Horse-Drawn Carnage. And the wind skill names don't follow the Garu naming convention, and instead go by Gasic. Because I guess they're cyclones. However, we have Tetra Break and Matarukaja, which are Mega 10 staples. Or I guess they're trying to make them Atlas staples. There's also another interesting option on the bottom, which says turn back the clock. This to me suggests either an easy setting option, or maybe some sort of gaming convention that uses time shenanigans. Notice how Gallica isn't one of the party members? It's because I believe she's the Navi or some sort of support character. If you squint, you can see her floating by where it says archetype call power. And that's either a coincidence or perhaps she in some way helps with archetype stuff. There also seems to be something like a press turn system. We don't really see how the battle system works, so I can't say for sure, but it looks really reminiscent to what we've seen in previous games. The next scene shows an evil looking suit of armor thing, then a knight on a horse. I almost feel like you have to fight them to use them in battle or something, because they look pretty reminiscent to what the archetype stuff looks like. Then the protag with Gallica and a little girl who looks like she's important, to me at least. Then protag at a tavern shaking hands with a sharp-dressed man with white hair, then a wolf girl in a castle, I think. Then a girl in a cloak and ruins, I think. And this introduces us to the bond component of the game, which looks very much like a social system, like social links, at least at a glance. But I think they might be party members potentially. We also get what seems to be the start of a name, Yufa, forming before it cuts to the next scene. And we get radical sword surfing. The mission is 0-0, but look at the party. The classes are different and the other characters don't have archetypes, but again, the classes are different. Magic Knight for Hulkenberg, Swordmaster for Stoll, and Magic Seeker for the protag. We also get another location, Skyrunner Cheredrius, which sounds like a ship. Then we see another location called Tyrant's Star. The name is really foreboding, but it also has this look that reminds me of that big Majora's Mask moon thing. So I don't know. Something I didn't mention is the weapons change throughout the trailer. It doesn't make it clear if this is per class or just individual weapons. Then we see a battle results page. Looks like a parade, which is a fun touch. Notice you get EXP and AEXP, and that's because archetypes level separate from characters. We then see spooky protag doing something evil looking, and then we see a stylized robot heart and like the New York subway system. I don't really know what that is. But the stylized heart is pretty important, I think, so I'll talk about that in a bit. Then we see an anime cutscene where we see that there's a girl with one striped stocking and a mod dress and a black character in a suit. Next is a silhouetted biblically accurate angel. Then elf guy pointing his sword. Then we see the face of that black guy that I saw. He's got a braid and a scar, and I think he's holding a head of a dead dog girl. And then we see Academia, which has the same lanterns in the shape of that background we saw in that thing where I said there's an evil looking knight. The statue looks like a clear reference to the Vitruvian Man. This looks like where you can learn more about archetypes, inherit skills from them, seekers, research. I can't venture a guess, same with the lectures or a listen. There's also a stat page with courage, wisdom, tolerance, eloquence, and imagination. It's related to the game in that I believe the protagonist is working to becoming king of the world. We then see everyone using their powers, then the menu again, and a silhouette, which I think is an archetype fight to unlock a new archetype. Then a boss fight. This guy is interesting because it's like a deformed human beast. He's also got the one eye that's a different color than the other, like the protag. Then the next part is another boss fight looking thing, but of a more traditional looking dragon with like behemoth Final Fantasy type horns. In this fight, the archetypes are different again. Now it's ninja, paladin, trickster, and soul hacker. And looking carefully, the beings themselves are different too. Then we see this weird void with the protag and the mysterious character. The text says, "This is the mirror of reality." Checking the Japanese, it says, "That is a mirror that reflects reality." And the text in Japanese says, "Isn't this the kind of utopia that this country should aim for?" Which ties back to the original sentiment of the trailer. What if this present is the utopia they envision? We then see a Bengal-looking cat with what looks like 3 infinity symbols intertwining with cogs or wheels in the middle of each ovular part. This to me is pretty symbolic. I imagine it relates to the themes of the game, a connection to the in-game world and the real world. It also looks like a book and quill are being sent some way. My guess is to the protagonist. Then we see the full transformation of the protagonist. He transforms into the archetype. You can tell because the color of the eyes match. We see some book pages with an angry royal, more book page, and then a girl reaching out. The same girl from the previous cutscene. Then we see the same suited man and note how he has a braid like the elf from the project reveal. Then we see more pages, what looks like a group shot of playable characters, then the archetype of the protag. There's more pages, a mecha looking thing that might be just an archetype, and images that look like drawings come to life of modern day. Someone casting swords of revealing light. The dragon again, more pages, then an empty journal with a heart on the cover, which reminds me of that heart thing we saw earlier, which also in that initial project trailer, we did see a book with a heart on it too. Then some mecha things, a weird creature casting something, more pages, and the buildup swells into the pages forming the title graphic. Metaphor, RE Fantasy. Now let's get into what they actually say. First, I think that voice speaking out could potentially be the protagonist, but I'm not sure. The next voice talks about person who gathers the most trust of the people shall be qualified to be the next king. We know this is a big deal because of the king's life was taken away and their son is in a coma-like state, which is probably the justification for the new bond system. And I would imagine there's quests that'll boost public standing. Some lady is pulling like Velvet Room energy with a style of dialogue, calling protag seemingly both a child attempting to rule and a traveler with a sorrow-filled heart. A lot of the dialogue centers around becoming king, and I just can't wait to be king. Various dialogue includes saying to defeat someone to be king and becoming the hero within. I really wish I knew Seiyu so I could extrapolate who was saying what and maybe what role they might be playing, but they're not really distinguishable to me, so I don't want to even try. But I think there's one voice that's probably something I can guess correctly. I believe the line, "Is that a human?" is in reference to you, and it's probably coming from Gallica. We get a line about someone gaining the most interesting power, which I believe is not the power that most of the people got, but I think it's something exclusive to the protagonist, and it might be exclusive to him writing in books. The most we can say for sure is that the protag probably is unique in this situation, and the vying for the throne might not just be a thing that he and his group is doing. I think there's multiple endings perhaps. Humans seem like they're either mythical, extinct, or just not necessarily welcome, especially because there's a line of dialogue that literally says that humans attacked the village. I wish there was more. Like, what about those pages in the text? I wish we could read that. Well, what if I told you we can read that? What if I told you the reason I kept saying Ari Fantasy instead of Fantazio was because I already know there's more? Well, let's look up the name metaphor re Fantazio. The word Fantazio isn't just a Japanese RPG made-up nonsense situation. It's actually Esperanto for the word, you guessed it, fantasy. Let's start from the beginning. Morolian on Twitter, I hope I said that right. Their content was directed to me from a trusted person that I trust greatly. I decided to read their Twitter thread about Re-Fantasy. Some of the stuff was a really nice overview of the announcement of Studio Zero all the way up until the release of the game's trailer. But to me, the biggest point of interest is once they dive into how they figured out the language in this game. They used the part of the trailer that says, "Face your fears, take back tomorrow," and they noted the runes were different in English and Japanese, almost like they were a one-to-one translation of what was being said. With help from their friend, they began to decode the metaphor runes. Their thread is linked in the sources, but suffice to say, they found the alphabet, with only a couple of letters missing. And when plugged in, it translates to Esperanto. When plugging in words we see every time the metaphor runes are used, they translate literally. For instance, the runes around each archetype says Seeker. Now, about those pages, the first page from the trailer that tears says, "Carry out the Ma, justice," and looking at the entire text, it's clear we can't see the whole thing. Here's some more. "Anything that would give birth would be rotten and bad. It follows that such cruelties would be ungodly. Of the I.O., those would have suffered the weight of ... They could do as they see fit professionally. Some people are friends with each other. For such ideals to manifest, society must, this that his citizens and through his fierce battle. Read the populace who listen to come. Entities that defend some quality of life and..." It's really hard to determine the meaning of all this because of how broken the translation is. So in order to just not make it difficult to understand, I'm just gonna put up the translations and you can read it, and then I'm gonna discuss it. So you gotta pause to read, unfortunately. So it's hard to know what's being said exactly, but the concept of anxiety is a mainstay in the discussion of this game. Even when it was just in the conceptual phase, in the real world, we are all stained with anxiety from the 2017 trailer, which has other interesting things, like the book, like I mentioned earlier. It looks really familiar to the one that we see in the trailer. And there's also a man who says, "War is near. Before they make me put down my pen and pick up a spear, I must finish this. A story of hope that can save the world." He talks about a world with only one tribe, a place with skyscrapers, and a modern city where all lives have equal value. This alone suggests metaphor is about the fantasy world, and taking everything they say, we should extrapolate the opposite. Their world is full of inequity. It's not one tribe, but several. We do know there's several races, and humans aren't looked upon as the good guys. according to a piece of dialogue that I mentioned from the Japanese trailer. Going back to the pages, this page is another interesting discussion about anxiety, but this page seems to make anxiety seem like a good thing? Interestingly, this page seems to support that content from the 2017 trailer, so it's probably still relevant. Some of how this is worded sounds political, and that's reminiscent of the political images we saw in the trailer, like the politicians on scales. But it also brings up utopia, and again, it kind of frames our world as perfect, but it reminds me of a line from the trailer about mirrors. This is the mirror of reality. I think that the world of metaphor is really just the discourse of things wrong with today's society. The idealization of the imagined reality is something we do in our entertainment. It reminds me of the Golden Show from Catherine, too. It makes me think of how maybe metaphor, besides being a literal metaphor for society, and going back to the archetypes, I think that that's where the name metaphor comes from. Because when I jokingly gave the definition of metaphor, it actually applies pretty well to how the archetypes work, at least according to how I'm thinking about it. I think the characters transform into the general ideas, and it's not literal that they are the actual thing, but rather a metaphor of what they could become. This page seems to touch on the choices, but also how to be a good leader. And this last page is just really interesting, getting insight to what the whole kingdom thing really means. I kind of applied that cipher throughout things, and I'm gonna spoil some classes right here, so skip ahead if you don't want to know about it. I found them by running the cipher through the text of the Vitruvian Man, and there's some interesting titles here. Before I even continue though, I do want to thank Spider for translating a lot of the books for me. I was doing it, but then she also just did it too, and she just is a lot faster than me, so she did more faster. Anyway, here are the titles that I saw. Messiah, Kung Fu Master, Sorcerer, Devil Summoner, or maybe it's Devil Summoned, not really sure. Priest, Sniper, and Meroleon also had other things that she found. She found Paladin, Samurai, and Prince in there. Feel free to look on your own to find out the other ones, but ultimately it's all very interesting. If I had to guess what this game is about, I'd say it's about a human writer with a strange power, and I think the power is tied to his writing, trying to become a new king. In this kingdom, there's multiple races, but humans aren't really well liked. Anxiety is probably the power source for the archetype system, and I believe that instead of the archetypes being persona type things, it's somehow things that they transform into, a la Digital Devil Saga. I believe outside the named characters we know, there's probably going to be more playable characters introduced. I think the name Metaphor re Fantazio is a play on the idea that typically the fantasy is the escape, but in this instance, they want to escape the fantasy. I also think that words and writing will have a huge role in the game, but I can't extrapolate exactly what that means. I really didn't go through everything that I found in the trailer, mostly because the live stream is coming up and I didn't want this stuff to be outdated. I needed to make this really fast. Shout out to my channel members, No Alternative, Carmageddon, FF12 Kid, and A Liar Remains a Lie. Thank you guys for being channel members. It means a lot to me. So what do you think Metaphor is about? Let me know. Thanks again, Meroleon. Thanks again, Spider, everyone who helped out. Anyway, goodbye, fellow metaphorists.